Hello and welcome to the 5-2 Diet podcast. We're here to help you lose weight and feel great with intermittent fasting. I'm Kate Harrison from the 5-2dietbook.com. I lost 31 pounds, that's 14 kilograms on this way of life, and I've written 4 books about it. I run one of the biggest 5-2 groups on the web, and I still fast every single week. Fasting is easy, flexible and free. This podcast will help you 5-2. Hello and welcome to the podcast. As I record this, I'm just ending 2 days of fasting. I'm feeling very energetic, even though it's definitely getting chillier here in the UK. It's just before Halloween 2015 and it's definitely the season for soups. So keep listening to hear why I loved the soup I had for lunch today and where you can find the recipe. Meanwhile, we've got a change of format for this month's podcast. I asked people in our 5-2 Facebook group for their questions. I'm going to give you my take on them, but remember that as always with intermittent fasting, there can be more than one right answer, depending on your own needs. It's one of the reasons why this form of fasting, this form of eating, is so successful for thousands of people, including me. But here are my thoughts on a few of this month's hot topics. Question number 1 comes from Sue, and she says, can you explain why we call this a way of eating or a way of life? W-O-E or W-O-L. And she also says, can you explain why some of us actively avoid the D word, the diet word? We do know that diet has bad connotations for many of us. Lots of us started dieting very, very early on in our lives, and generally it hasn't always been the most successful thing. We might lose weight on a diet, but then as soon as we head back to a normal lifestyle with normal food choices, we find the weight comes back on, sometimes even more. Now, language is important, and therefore the words that you choose to describe the choices that you're making can have a real impact on success. For me personally, I see diet as a word that means what we eat on a day-to-day basis, not necessarily a calorie-controlled diet. But if the words or the phrase way of eating or way of life work well for you, that's fantastic. What those phrases do is they emphasise the sustainability of this approach to eating and the fact that you can do it for years, as many of us do and many of us plan to. I personally would like to try to keep this going for the rest of my life, and I can't see a reason not to. Language around fasting and non-fasting days generally is something I've talked about a bit on the podcast before. Fast days or fasting days are pretty easy. Non-fasting days, well, it depends. Would you use the word feast day, for example, which is something I've used in the past? Some people think it's great because, as I feel, once you've had a fast day where you've been very limited on your calories, then you see any meal at all as a feast. It's a real feast for the senses, from how it smells to how it tastes. But some people see feast as a word they associate with perhaps binging or overdoing it. So they might go for non-fast days, healthy days, normal days, whatever you choose. But I definitely think it's useful to occasionally take a look at the language, interrogate it a bit, and see whether diet or way of eating, way of life, approach to eating, or as I quite like to call it, the intermittent fasting strategy, is the best word for you to use, because the words you use will shape your success and your journey. Sue also suggested that I talk about, in her own words, the way people can feel guilty on non-fasting days. That so many find it difficult to relax with 5-2, seem driven to complicate it. She says she's not being judgmental, but she is concerned. And yes, it is true that some people get very anxious around intermittent fasting, especially when they learn that it can be as simple as just cutting down what you eat twice a week. When we've had calorie counting and points and various other approaches drummed into us over the years, the idea that we could have this kind of freedom, well, it can seem a little bit alarming. She talks about how people find it hard to relax, and I think that the best way to get through that is to read through the forums or read some of the books or listen to some of the earlier podcasts that I've recorded with people who've made a success of this. And you will find that they were surprised as well at the beginning of the process, as I was, at how effective this could be with so little in the way of rules or restrictions or complicated things to get your head around. My next set of questions, 2 questions, are all about calories and especially how many you should aim to eat on fasting and non-fasting day. So Vicky says, is it still 500 calories that you should eat on a fast day regardless of your TDEE? That's 500 for women, 600 for men. Now, my answer to this starts with explaining the TDEE. If you haven't come across that, it's the abbreviation for total daily energy expenditure, and that's an estimate of how many calories your body needs on a daily basis to sustain the weight that you are at the moment. So not to lose weight, but not to put it on either. It is an estimate. To work it out exactly, we'd have to spend time in a very controlled environment for quite a long time, be very expensive and impractical for most of us. And the estimate does work for a lot of us. It is based on things like our age, our activity levels and our weight, because the heavier you are, the more calories you need to sustain your body's systems and to literally get you around. Now, the reason that Vicky's asking this about the 500 or 600 calories is that those are based on an average of what we need. So those fast day guidelines of around 500 calories for a man, 600 for a woman, they're based on taking a quarter of what the average man or woman needs to sustain their current weight. The idea of the quarter, therefore, is if you're eating just a quarter of what your body needs twice a week, then you're going to create a calorie deficit, which is a lack of calories that your body is going to hopefully burn fat in order to make up the difference to give you the energy to live your life. So what that means is that if your TDEE is much higher than average, then in theory, to keep up with that quarter, you could have a lot more. So for example, if your average calorie requirement is around about 3,000 calories. That could be because you're doing a lot of exercise or because you're pretty heavy. You could cut down to a quarter, which would be around 750 calories on a fast day. I would say that it is worth looking at that, especially if you have a lot of weight to lose, because it can be quite difficult to begin with to adjust to the 500 calories. And if you're a bit heavier, you will still get good results by cutting down to a quarter. I think in the longer term, it's probably best to aim for 500, because as you get towards a normal weight, then probably your TDEE, your estimated energy expenditure, is going to be around about the 2,000 mark, give or take. Mine's actually a bit lower now because I'm a fairly short person, 5'4", and also I weigh a lot less than I did. So my daily calorie requirement is around about 1,800 calories. If I ate a lot more than that, if I actually ate the average over time, then it's likely that I might start to put a little bit of weight back on again. A linked question to that, therefore, the second question on calories comes from Angela, and she says, "Hi Kate, do you have to recalculate your TDEE while you're losing weight? And how much do you have to lose before you do?" Yes, I would say it is a good idea to recalculate your TDEE. As I've explained, I did, because mine came down as I lost the weight, lost 2 stone, and a good idea is to recalculate roughly every half a stone that you lose. So that's maybe every 3 to 4 kilograms. The reason is that, as I say, your calorie requirements will come down and it's good to stay aware. It's also important if you are using that TDEE as a guideline on your non-fast days. That's something that quite a few people do. I started off and I just ate what I wanted on the non-fast days, but the TDEE can be a good guideline, especially if you're somebody who's dieted for many, many years and you find it very difficult to let go completely of being aware of what you ate. So if you recalculate your TDEE over time, we've got people here who've lost perhaps 5-6 stone in weight, an awful lot of weight, then their calorie requirements are going to come down. And it's good to stay aware of that, especially once you get to the maintenance stage, because you don't want to do all this hard work and then find that just because you're eating as much as your old TDEE was, you're actually putting the weight back on again. Of course, there is a way to counter any reduction in that energy requirement, and that is to move more. The more exercise you do, the more active you are on a daily basis, the more calories you're going to need. We're on to a very seasonal question now. This is especially relevant for those of us like me in the Northern Hemisphere. Nicola wants to know, is there a reason why a lot of people feel so cold on a fast day? It is true, I find it myself. I haven't got great circulation in my fingers and in my toes especially, and they become like lumps of ice even on a normal day. And on a fast day, I certainly feel it that little bit more. There are a variety of factors at play here. One of them is that when we're fasting, we're digesting less food, and that digestive process itself generates heat within the body. There's a reason that we talk about burning and calories in the same sentence. There is heat generated inside our systems as food goes through the digestion and we convert it to energy. In addition, if the body realises it's getting fewer calories than usual on that day, it goes into the repair mode, which we talk about, which is desirable, where we're housekeeping the cells in the body and helping to keep them healthy, getting rid of any that have outlived their usefulness. But while it's doing that, the body, it may also try and preserve energy. It's going to concentrate on some of the essential processes in the body, and the most essential are obviously your circulation to the most vital bits of your body, your brain and your heart especially. So the extremities, the hands, the feet, may be left a bit to fend for themselves on those days, and they stay at a lower temperature and we really feel it. It's something I've talked about quite a lot with Linda Grucci, who's one of our administrators and moderators in the 5-2 Facebook group, and also the author of a really useful little book on Kindle called 5-2 Fasting and Fitness. She explains the science behind fasting and why it has so much potential to do you good in really simple but informed ways. She says, well, that heating up that I talked about as we digest food is called the thermic effect of food. And she makes the point as well that it was one of the reasons we used to be told to eat little and often because it helps keep us warmer. Now that isn't really practical on a fast day. So my suggestion, well, I've got two: drink lots and lots of low-calorie hot drinks and wear thicker socks and jumpers. It's that simple. I also, because I have quite a sedentary job, typing and writing, I sometimes wear fingerless gloves in the winter. So I can still type, but my fingers are kept nice and cosy. You know, the answer to the previous one as well about how you can help keep your TDEE up, it's also going to help keep you warm if you move more, if you exercise more. So Nicola, I hope that helps. The next question is about discussing the benefits of 5-2 with health professionals. So the question is, I would like to stop taking statins and also possibly blood pressure tablets. Can you recommend how I should open the discussion? Now, in a way, this is a two-part question, I think, and certainly I'm not a doctor, so I can't offer, and I never would offer, specific medical advice. But I think the key with health professionals is to explain your own research and to point them towards other sources of research. So they might look at the various books on the subject of fasting. One of the sites I really like, for example, is called Mark's Daily Apple, and he has looked at the paleo lifestyle, but he also looked at fasting as part of that, and he summarises a lot of the research studies, but also what he's looked into himself and his own experiences. The thing with talking to health professionals is obviously they want evidence, and the issue with 5-2 at the moment is that although there is some interesting evidence on all sorts of factors, including improvements to blood pressure and cholesterol readings and the rest, we don't know for sure that that's going to work for everybody. We do hope, certainly, that 5-2 and weight loss in general will be beneficial to your blood pressure, but we can't be sure of that, and certainly it would be putting the cart before the horse a little bit, I think, to be going to the doctor straight away and saying, I've just started 5-2, therefore can we talk about reducing my meds, because the doctors put you on those meds for a reason, and just expressing the intent to do something doesn't always necessarily mean A, it's going to happen, and B, it's going to have the desired effect. However, taking responsibility for managing your own health and looking at ways that you might improve it is something that almost all doctors feel absolutely fine with, and more than that, will positively encourage. So try to make it a dialogue based on evidence and based on your own results. And over time, if you're able to have that discussion, not always easy when you've got a limited time perhaps in the surgery, but if you build up over time, keep a record of your own weight, your own blood pressure, perhaps if you've got a monitor at home, then you've got evidence to give to them, and they're much more likely to be able to have a positive discussion, dialogue about this. I've got one last question for today from Diane. What do you do if 5-2 isn't working currently as an aid to weight loss? She says she's been stuck now for a number of months, despite sticking religiously to 400 calories on fast days and eating up to that TDEE on the non-fast days. She says she'd like to relax and not overcomplicate, but the simple approach just doesn't seem to be working. First of all, I know it's really disappointing when things aren't going as planned, Diane, so well done for keeping going. It is pretty rare that if you stick to this plan properly, it won't work, because although there are additional health benefits from the fasting, fundamentally 5-2 works as a calorie reduction diet. So if other calorie controlled diets have worked for you, you've cut down on the amount you're eating and you've lost weight, then this one should work in the same way. If you're pretty sure that you are following the rules and that you're not overdoing it a bit on some of the non-fast days, then I think it is worth talking to your doctor just to make sure that there aren't any endocrine or hormonal issues that are affecting your weight loss. Though I have to say that is pretty rare. It may also be worth taking in some other ways of kick-starting your body's weight loss. A really good one to start with, and it's a good idea for all of us, is to cut down on refined carbohydrates in your diet on those non-fast days. Obviously, we do have a lot of freedom to eat what we want on those days, within reason. However, as things have been struggling and been going slowly for you, Diane, you might like to think about reducing those refined carbs, so cutting out white bread, white sugar, cakes, anything like that. Having a slightly lower carbohydrate diet can help speed things up, and the other things it will do is to help reduce the sweet tooth. I found that the more sweet things I eat, the more I want them, and the opposite is also thankfully true, that if I reduce the number of sweet things I'm eating, I don't want them as much. I would say, though, that in most cases where people worry about diets not working, it is a case of underestimating what you eat. I'm not saying this is the case here, but in a lot of occasions, when you look more closely at your diet, you forget about things, and the best way to overcome that is to write down everything you eat, especially on the non-fasting days. We tend to be a bit less vigilant on those. Write it down. Weigh your portion sizes as well. It can be astonishing how big the portion size is that you're eating. You can really get this portion distortion thing where you believe that you're eating, say, the recognised portion on the packet of cereal, and actually you're eating 3 or 4 times that. And obviously that would mean the calories do mount up. So double check that. Think about low carbing a bit. And if you're concerned long term, then do check with your doctor. So finally, I said I'd mention soup, and actually it's a perfect soup that I've been eating today if you are trying to cut down on carbohydrates as well, because this soup is naturally lower carb. It's a recipe that, the basic recipe, comes from my book, The 5-2 Good Food Kitchen, and it's a cauliflower cheese soup, and I absolutely love it. I love cauliflower cheese, but the way we make this, we add a little bit of mustard to it, and we put the cheese in the topping so that you get all the benefit without having to add too much cheese. I made a version today because I had cauliflower and broccoli in the fridge, which was a cauliflower and broccoli cheese. It's a bit greener than the cauliflower only version, as you'll see from the picture that I've added to the website. But it was really hearty, really delicious, naturally very low in carbohydrate because cauliflower and broccoli are both low carb vegetables. So it's not going to give you any cravings, but it is very filling. So have a look at the website, the5-2dietbook.com. Look for the recipe taken from that book, 5-2 Good Food Kitchen. Have a look at doing your own variation on it. You could lay off the cheese and add some Indian spices, for example, give it a curried feel, and perhaps a little bit of sour cream mixed in at the very last minute, and some fresh herbs. If you've enjoyed hearing my answers to some of these questions, we're there all the time. There's always somebody in the 5-2 Facebook group talking about exactly these issues, and as well there are some fantastic photos in there at the moment. I've been noticing of people's successes. There's nothing better to keep you on track on a fast day. So you can join in for free at facebook.com/groups/the52diet. Or if you've got other questions, you can tweet me as well. I'm at the52diet. Of course, if you want a bit more detail, some inspiring stories of people who've found their own way through 5-2, you can try the 2 cookbooks, the Ultimate 5-2 Diet Recipe Book or 5-2 Good Food Kitchen. Both of them feature 10 different stories of people who've found a way to make it work for them And they also explain what they eat on fasting days and non-fasting days, which I know people can find really useful to see how this diet actually feels in reality. I say diet, I call it a diet. You call it a way of living, way of eating, whatever you like. I'll tell you what else it is for me. It's freedom. Thanks so much for listening today. Happy pumpkin carving if that's your thing and you're listening to this before Halloween, and happy fasting. For many more free tips, case studies, recipes and lots of information, visit the 5-2dietbook.com. Follow me on Twitter at the52diet or download free samples of the books online at Amazon. Thanks for listening.